Yes, hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you out there. My name is Moritz Henning, and I'm very pleased to welcome you today to the second symposium of our project, Contested Modernities, Post-Colonial Architecture in Southeast Asia. I'm one of the initiators and artistic directors of the project, and I'm also speaking on behalf of my three partners, Sally Belo, Christian Hiller, and Eduard Kögel. We are taking turns introducing the events, and today I am allowed to speak on behalf of the project, and it's a pleasure and an honor to do so. And before I very briefly say a few words about the project itself, I'd like to mention a few organizational issues. We have a technical director for this Zoom conference, Roman Pilgrim, who will make sure everything runs smoothly and, if necessary, can mute even your microphone. Which brings me to the first request. We are all used to it by now, but still, please mute your microphones. During the symposium, the chat function will be active. If you have questions or comments that we can discuss later, please feel free to post them in the chat. Our moderator will have a conversation with all the contributors later and will include your input. If you would like to contribute to the conversation later, please use the raise your hand feature. You can find it in the bottom right corner under the word reactions. And beyond this Zoom event that we are all participating in now, our partner Arch Plus, who just recently published the accompanying publication, is streaming us live on Facebook right now. I want to say a few words about the content. Contested Modernities is a continuation of the program Encounters with Southeast Asian Modernism that began in 2019 and was part of the centennial of the famous German art and architecture school Bauhaus. In the run-up to this jubilee, all four of us felt the need to add an aspect to the Eurocentric discussion on modernism, namely the development of post-colonial architecture in Southeast Asia. What interests us in this topic are the narratives of the different modernities in Southeast Asia here, and to critically question them, how the history, present, and future of the buildings and urban spaces are dealt with, the discourse about the promises that accompanied these architectural programs at the time and their meaning today, but also the actors involved in this topic then and now. In Europe, this period of architectural modernism is largely unknown, while in the region itself, however, an intense discourse has developed in recent years. Just think of the activities of the Marziana network. And I'm quite happy that we have Johannes Widodo, who is one of the initiators of this network. We have him here in the audience. So, hello, Johannes. This is why we decided to launch our project and discuss this topic together here in Germany and in Southeast Asia. Thanks to funding from the German Federal Foreign Office, we were able to work with 4 curatorial teams in Phnom Penh, Jakarta, Yangon, and Singapore to put together a program that addresses current issues in dealing with post-colonial architecture from their perspectives. The result was really magnificent. We spent a long time in Southeast Asia, and the result included exhibitions, architectural tours, films, screenings, lecture programs, interviews, and artistic formats. We had the great pleasure to be part of it, and we really learned a lot. And actually, the name Contested Modernities for the project we have now, that we have chosen for the second part of the project, reflects these experiences and the fact that both the concept of modernity and its buildings are highly contested, not only in Southeast Asia. Our goal now is to connect the discussions in Germany, Europe, and Southeast Asia, as we have found that there are many interesting aspects that are worth sharing. We actually planned to open the exhibition Contested Modernities last year in September. It should have been based on the programs in the 4 cities of Southeast Asia and supplemented by us with a look at the relations between the former German states, the German Democratic Republic and the Federal Republic of Germany. As the situation with COVID is getting better now, at least in Germany, we are very much hoping to open the exhibition this fall at the House of Statistics, a venue that was deliberately chosen by us and about which we will hear more in a moment. Before we start with the program, I would like to thank in particular the Berlin Cultural Capital Fund and the Berlin Capital Cultural Fund and the Federal Ministry of the Interior, Building and Community for funding the overall project. Many thanks for that. Furthermore, we are supported by the Berlin Senate Department for Urban Development and Housing, the governing mayor of Berlin, Senate Chancellery, the Goethe Institutes in Jakarta, Myanmar and Singapore, the Embassy of the Federal Republic of Germany in Singapore, the Embassy of the Republic of Indonesia in Berlin, the National University of Singapore, Department of Architecture, where our presenter Nikhil Joshi comes from, that I will introduce soon. And finally, Stadtkultur International and the House of Statistics. Their support allows us to push some things a little bit further and also to try out different formats once in a while during these special times. We will see 2 examples of this today, namely 2 pre-produced videos. I would like to thank Weng and his team from Docomomo Singapore, as well as Maria Rosantina and Gregorius Yulodi from the architects firm Die Associés in Jakarta for taking on the challenge of producing a video for our project. I think it's not every day that architects...
Nein.
Hello?
Passt.
Okay. I think it's not every day that architects are asked to make a film, and I can well imagine how complex it was. Yes. So before I finally hand over to our presenter, I would like to follow up on Sally Belo's personal words at our first symposium. In 2019, we were in Myanmar with a project, and we were able to meet many, many wonderful people there. The news of the military coup on February 1st hit us deeply. We can't do much from here. The feeling of powerlessness is painful. I would therefore like to quote the Buddhist monk and former architect Ashin Panagivasaka, whom we had the honor to meet in Yangon, and whose words greet me nearly every morning on Facebook. May Myanmar be soon free from disasters, dangers, diseases, despots, and conflicts. We are with you. And now I finally hand over to our moderator, Nikhil Joshi. Nikhil, architect, activist, and lecturer at the Department of Architecture of the National University of Singapore, was part of the team for the contribution to Encounters 2019 in Singapore, together with Ho Pui Peng and Johannes Widodo. We are pleased to have him with us today, and he will be leading through the day. Nikhil, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Moritz. Thank you very much. And good evening from Singapore. It's almost 8:10 here. And yeah, thank you very much for a very interesting introduction. I think it's wonderful for people to know from where we are coming and why we are here. So I will be just giving a very brief of about today's symposium, the present of modernity. That's what it's called, the present of modernity. It's very important, especially in Southeast Asia, that for everyone to know that how we are dealing with our modern heritage here, and what are the challenges faced by architects and conservation professionals here because of the rapid urbanization which we are seeing in almost all developing nations in Southeast Asia. So we'll have 4 speakers today. 2 speakers will be sharing slides, and and two of them will be showing very interesting videos, and I'm sure you all will enjoy it. So our first speaker is from Getty Conservation Institute in Los Angeles, California, and Antoine Wilmering is a senior program officer at Getty Foundation, and he has been instrumental in conception and implementation of a very important fellowship program called Keeping It Modern, and I'm sure some of you might have heard about it. And Anton is going to talk about this fellowship program and how it was conceived and implemented. And Anton has got a experience, a very wide experience. He has been in UK, Cotard Institute of Art, and also with the World Monuments Fund. And so I'm not going to talk too much because I've got 5 minutes and I think I've used 4.5 of that. So the screen is, please welcome Anton, and the screen is yours, Anton.
Thank you so much, Nikhil. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to start sharing my screen, which is now going. So I'll be talking about a program called Keeping It Modern, but before I do so, I thought it'd probably be helpful to talk for a minute or so about the Getty. And the Getty is a visual arts nonprofit organization. We're non-governmental, we're a private operating foundation. And within the trust, we have 4 what we call programs. One is a museum, especially in Los Angeles, well known among the public. We have a research institute for academic art history, a conservation institute that sort of explores, researches, and educates people in the field who are specializing in art conservation or the preservation of architecture. And then the smallest program is the foundation. That's where I work. And in the foundation, we support areas where the trust is active. So we support academic art history research, we support museums in various ways, and we support advancing the practice of conservation. And the practice of conservation ranges really from museum objects, training conservators, and the preservation of architecture. And we do so by developing strategic initiatives. So these are multi-year funding initiatives where we have a particular goal, and we develop that goal actually, and we develop the initiative in discussion with colleagues in the field. And Keeping It Modern, one of its goals is also to further the Conserving of Modern Architecture initiative launched by the Getty Conservation Institute in 2012. Keeping It Modern started 2 years later in 2014. So the goal was very broad, to advance the conservation and stewardship of 20th century architecture. And one of our strategies in this funding initiative was to open our doors for a grant competition where we would consider projects from all over the world and support and fund mostly research and planning. And we were sure to make this a fully international initiative, because, as you know, modern architecture, modernities, exist in every culture, in every country virtually, in its own unique forms, even though, we can speak of an international style about certain modalities of architecture. Each region in the world, each country has its individual take on what is modern, what is a modernity. We found that, and we knew this also from experience, that in conservation practice, often a project is taken on. There's a phase of discovery, and then there's the implementation. So there's the readaptive use study, and then there's the implementation as one project. Because the Getty and the Getty Foundation, because we value research and planning, one of the steps that we thought we would advocate was to share and to separate the two. So to sort of promote the fact that you can do first your planning and even management planning, and then do preservation at a different stage, sort of the actual bricks and mortar work. And so these were our 5 strategies as part of the Keeping It Modern initiative. We support research and planning. We support conservation management planning. Conservation management planning is this idea that once you understand what is the significance of a particular site or a particular building, then based on that significance, you can develop policies that help preserve this monument or site. And by understanding what the significance is, the process of understanding what the significance is best done through stakeholder consultation. So it is a process where the organizers, where the owners of the buildings, where the conservation consultants would work with the stakeholders from government officials to the local community to explore what is significant about the site. And once there's an agreement about that, you can develop policy for the preservation. And then you're pretty much ensured that you have buy-in at all levels in your conservation plan. So not only in the short term, but also in the long term, you will have that established that buy-in. Now, we have been funding for 7 years, between 2014 and 2020, and we awarded about 77 grants for buildings and spent about $12,500,000 over that time. One of our strategies was to, in addition to awarding these grants, to also bring the grantees and a consultant of the project together in a workshop in London. And we felt that by talking about issues of research and planning and conservation management planning, by visiting sites where you could see a conservation management plan in action, it would provide a valuable learning opportunity for our grantees. And it would also help our grantees to feel connected to one another, so that they knew that actually the building that I'm working on, where I'm doing a readaptive study, even though the building is perhaps different in design and with the materials, the concept and the principles of the approach would be the same. So there would be this shared feeling that even though we're in different parts of the world, we have these shared histories and we have these shared problems. So what I will do, and we talked about it with Moritz beforehand, I will focus about 3 projects and talk a little bit about each as I go through them. But I will be brief because obviously we don't have, we have 20 minutes to do so. So I'll talk about the Henry Luce Memorial Chapel in Taiwan that was designed by I.M. Pei and C.K. Chun in 1962. I'll talk about the Middle Eastern University METU in Ankara, Turkey, designed by Altug and Beruts Chinichi in 1963. And then about Charles Correa's stadium, Patel Stadium in Ahmedabad, by Charles Correa, designed in 1966. So the process of grant making and the process of awarding a grant in 2014, in our first round, we did not have an open call for proposals, but we invited projects so that we would be able to still review projects. We would still have an international advisory committee to help us select projects, help us with the recommendation for projects that were worthy of funding. But we did select them beforehand. And we wanted to do that because then we could signal to the field with our first round of grants what our aim was and what the level and quality of the architecture was that we were hoping to support. Now, the chapel in Taiwan, I think, is a very interesting project with an interesting history. First off, it is built in a region in Taiwan. It's in the center. It's in Taichung, where there are earthquakes, there are vicious typhoons, and it has a high humidity climate. Originally, it was planned to be built out of wood because wood is wood constructions are flexible. And I live in California. I live in a wooden house because when there's an earthquake, the wood flexes more, say, than a brick building. So not so with the Loose Chapel. It was built out of concrete. The initial design was by I.M. Pei, and I think C.K. Chen, who designed the whole campus of Tonghai University. He completed this building. What is interesting about it, it has these two sails at two sides that come up, and then they're divided by glass. So you have this beautiful glass structure in the middle, and that at the top incorporated these sort of natural ventilation. Over the years, that natural ventilation, those natural vents, had been closed and air conditioning had been introduced for the comfort of the congregation. However, when you introduce air conditioning, it creates condensation, and the condensation contributed to the corrosion of the windows at the top. So as part of the plan and part of the research, they have now actually reopened those vents so that there's, again, this natural circulation possible. Also, quite a beautiful feature of this project is the fact that when it was built, they embedded these beautiful sort of lozenges-shaped tiles into the concrete. And because of the humidity and because of the typhoons, there is now salt formation, and that's pushing off some of the glazes that you see on the right here in the slide. So some of the glazing is pushed off by the salts. So they have several conservation problems that they have to solve. And they have an excellent team on the ground to do so. Now, what I wanted to mention here is, for me, a very special thing. When I first spoke with the priest who is in charge of the chapel, their first idea was just to buy a high-pressure cleaner and then to clean the exterior of the church. And from that ask until going through the whole process, now the Loose Chapel is the first modern building ever listed as of national importance, national significance in Taiwan. So this shows the power of a team of experts on the ground that goes way beyond a grant that we give. It really shows that people are embracing the project, they're identifying with the project, and take it to the highest level possible. And we have seen it throughout the Keeping It Modern initiative. We've seen that with METU in Ankara in Turkey, where the faculty of the university, and this is the architecture building, they created a conservation management plan and understood from the very beginning that you would have to work with stakeholders, you would have to work with your communities to ensure that there is buy-in, to ensure that people identify with the building. And one of the campaigns that they had was to have the students look at their favorite part of the building and then photograph them hugging that part. And it not only shows that, that the areas that they identified, but it also the physicality of it, the physicality of hugging a part of a building does create a connection. And I thought it was a very interesting aspect of the work that they did. But they were also aware of other stakeholders, other communities. You will hopefully at some point have a chance to look at their website. And on the website, they provide this QR code. Once you click that, on your phone, you can actually do a visual walkthrough part of the building and see the relationships between the different rooms and the different parts of the building. So the online community, the online stakeholders, so to speak, will also have access to this building, will also be able to engage with it. And I think this, the team of consultants on this project, the faculty members, the students, have done an outstanding job with this. What I'm showing you here on the right slide of this image, on the right side, is their conservation report. And I will talk about it in a minute because we are making, for the benefit of the field, together with the grantees, we're making these reports available for free download. So currently we already have a report library with 33 projects represented. And as the grants complete their work, we will be adding more reports to it. Now, the last project I want to talk about, and like the other ones, I will be brief, is the Patel Stadium in Ahmedabad in India. Now, as part of Keeping It Modern, we supported 4 stadia. One is the Miami Marine Stadium on the left upper hand side, a stadium that's connected to the sea. Yoyogi Stadium in Japan, and Nervi Stadium in Rome, very important project and very similar to the project in Ahmedabad because it focuses on readaptive use. And in Ahmedabad, you have this really fabulous stadium that was designed, like I said before, by Charles Correa in 1966. It could seat 50,000 people. It has an important history because many important matches were performed at this stadium, including, I think, the win of India over Australia. So there are, it's a stadium that is rich with history, that is rich with people's experiences of getting there together and rooting for one team. But now the stadium has been overtaken by a new stadium that can seat 130,000. Cricket is very popular, so the larger stadium seems to be filling up pretty easily, but nonetheless, the older stadium exists and is of high significance architecturally. And here's an interesting comparison, I think, with Nervi Stadium in Rome. This stadium, Patel Stadium, is loved by the community. People have had this history with the stadium, and like the Nervi Stadium, there is this warmth, this memory. And, that's an important thing to consider, because those are important stakeholders, the people with those memories. And as you develop a conservation management plan, and as you determine the significance of a building, that sort of the significance that lies at the root of the conservation management plan, you would have to engage those local stakeholders. And next week, the World Monument Fund, together with the local authorities, are organizing, and you can still subscribe to this. They're organizing a 2-day meeting with international experts to help explore what is the significance of Patel Stadium, and what are those levels of significance and those values that you would have to attach to this building and have to attach to this project, so that that your policies are reflected in that, and that your plan ultimately will have the approval of the local authorities and of the local communities. Now, as part of Keeping It Modern, we also have been surveying our participants. And I would like to add that the participants that we surveyed the owners of the buildings and the key consultants, because we were trying to figure out what's the impact of our funding, what are people actually doing, what are they achieving. Well, you can see here very briefly is that we were curious about, has a conservation management plan been adopted? And we have surveyed in 2019 and 2020, and there is at least there's close to 50% of respondents that are where the CMP has been adapted, more so in 2020, and we think that this will be a positive trend going forward. The workshop that was organized by the 20th Century Society in London, these are the grantee convenings that I mentioned earlier, and where the content of the workshop is delivered by our colleagues at the Getty Conservation Institute. And by the way, this year we're having this workshop online, and I noticed that Margherita Pedroni of the Conservation Institute is in the audience, and she's in the workshop too, delivering content. These workshops are very powerful in helping build a cohort. So it's not only about the trying to share information about best practices or how you develop a conservation management plan, but very powerful is the formation of the cohort, and also the self-identifying of people with Keeping It Modern as a brand. And that's something we did not expect, but there is a fairly large international network that came out of the Keeping It Modern grants. So another of our questions was, did you, has the Keeping It Modern grant had any influence on how the building is valued? And so we asked, did the grant help to raise awareness about the significance of the building? And the responses are quite telling, I think. There's within the local community, within the conservation community, high response of people that better understand the building. Also with the local public, and a bit less so with government officials, the reason probably being that they were already aware of the significance. We were also quite interested to see if our funds and our grants ranged between maybe 90,000 euros to $250,000, roughly in that range. Did that actually incentivize others to also provide funding, either to support more of the planning work or to support some implementation. And here too, we had quite a high response rate where other funding had been leveraged based on the conservation plan or based on our initial grant. And that tells us, and we knew this a little bit in our funding, from our funding history, that the Getty has, for some reason, sort of, the field knows that if a Getty gives a grant, that it's been thoroughly vetted. So there is a sort of golden seal of approval implicit with the grant, and that makes it a bit easier for other funders to step up. And here I just want to show a brief map of the type of networks that came to be. And you can see that actually we had 5 grants, by coincidence, 5 grants in Brazil. And in Brazil, the projects really got together, and they have presented at the Docomomo meeting in Latin America, at the 20th Century Science Committee of ICOMOS, and they present themselves as a keeping it modern group, and so very strongly identified with the brand that we actually had not intended, and it also created this network of specialists who were eager to share what their lessons were learned and how that could be a benefit to others. Lastly, what I'd like to mention before I stop is that we have this Keeping It Modern report library. We felt, because so many excellent reports were developed by our grantees, that if they would be willing to share these as downloads for the field, that it would help others in the field to understand the practices, to understand the approaches, and perhaps adopt some of these strategies, some of the methods applied to their own projects. I had numbers of the downloads, but can't find them now. But the use of the library is fairly high, and I recommend you to make use of this when you have a chance. And later on, I will put a link in the chat to the library, so that if you want to link to it, you can do it directly from the chat. And I think with that, I will say thank you very much. And Nikhil and Moritz, I think, ready for the next speaker. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Antoine. Fascinating, I would say, in what you have achieved in 6 to 7 years of this program, of this fellowship. I hope that you can restart it once the COVID is gone, and you have more money for grants. And it's just amazing. I've been to Ahmedabad. I've been to the Charles Correa was my favorite, one of my favorite architects when I was a student in India. And I mean, I know the new building as well, but it's not as beautiful as Correa's Sardar Patel Bhavan, to be honest. So wonderful work by Getty, and especially when you are talking about this collaborations and public engagement and sharing of knowledge. I think that's freely sharing of knowledge, on websites and everything where people can download. It's just amazing. And just to let you know that I just got an email from Getty today morning that I've been selected for the program, the online program. So I will be joining that program as a participant from September to October. So thank you very much for that. So fantastic start of our symposium. Thanks, Anton. So our second speaker today is from Jakarta, Indonesia, and they are a very young and dynamic team of architects named Maria Rosatina and Gregorius Supi Yolundi, and their firm is called D Associates. It's an award-winning a young firm in Jakarta who has done several interesting projects, and they are going to share a very, very interesting project with us, which is which Anton just said about the adaptive reuse of stadiums. So they have done a project where they have not just done the adaptive reuse of the stadium, but also the public space. And I think what they are going to show us in the video is more about the public space, which is in the immediate surrounding rather than the building. So the screen is yours, Maria and Gregorius.
Hello. Hi, everyone.
Hello, everyone.
I'm Gregorius Elodie, and
I'm Maria Arasantino.
so I think we prepare for a short movie that's to show you guys the experiencing of the building. Actually, we have a chance to renovate the old stadium from since Asian Games, fourth Asian Games in 1962 in Jakarta. Then we held another Asian Games in 2018. So that building been conserved and renovated to achieve the new standard of Asian Games. I think I hand it to Roman to show the movie. Thank you.
Mengucap Bismillah, saya menyatakan Asian Games keempat tahun 1962 di Jakarta terbuka.
Sesuai dengan konsep bahwa tempat ini, kompleks ini akan menjadi lagi sebuah taman publik seluas 128 hektar dari keseluruhan 273 hektar. 128 hektar adalah sebuah fasilitas olahraga, di mana fasilitas olahraga ini kemudian akan menjadikan sebagai public space baru di tengah kota Jakarta. Untuk persiapan Asian Games, kompleks ini direnovasi mulai dari tahun 2016, kemudian pelaksanaan dari 2017 untuk Asian Games 2018. Untuk konsepsi yang baru, di mana kompleks ini akan menjadi satu kesatuan, sebuah taman publik dengan fasilitas olahraga yang baik, seluruh kawasan ini memiliki satu interkonektivitas baik antara stadion, ruang terbuka, landscape, yang menjadi sebuah harmoni untuk sebagai sebuah taman publik yang baru.
Ya, kehadiran GBK memang punya dua makna sih. Yang pertama adalah maknanya penting bagi diplomasi dan juga hubungan internasional Indonesia sebagai negara yang baru merdeka di dunia internasional. Jadi kehadiran GBK sebenarnya diinisiasi atau diawali dengan keinginan Indonesia untuk menjadi tuan rumah bagi Asian Games keempat. Dan untuk itu Gelora Bung Karno akhirnya didirikan dengan bantuan teknisi dan juga perancang dari Uni Soviet waktu itu. Jakarta akhirnya memilih salah satu tempat di antara kota yang sudah ada, Jakarta, kawasan Walter Freyden juga, kawasan yang memang sudah berkembang sampai awal abad 20, dan juga terletakkan GBK ini juga sangat strategis, jadi diletakkan di antara kota Jakarta dan juga kota Kebayoran Baru yang baru didirikan, baru berkembang di masa awal kemerdekaan Indonesia. Jadi keberadaan GBK di tengah-tengah di antara kota Kebayoran Baru dan juga kota Jakarta Lama itu membuat menyempurnakan simpul dan juga hubungan antara dua kota ini menjadi sebuah kota metropolitan yang besar. Dan bersamaan dengan itu juga GBK juga dirancang dengan dihubungkan dengan dua jalan bypass, jadi jalan bypass timur dan juga jalan bypass barat, dan bersimpul di jembatan Semanggi, interchange yang merupakan juga sebenarnya simpul tempat GBK itu diletakkan gitu. Jadi perkembangan kota Jakarta itu tidak lepas dari perkembangan dan penentuan lokasi GBK yang ditentukan di tahun 59. Karena waktu itu ada beberapa pilihan untuk meletakkan GBK. Jadi waktu insinyur Uni Soviet sudah bekerja dan mempresentasikan beberapa rancangan mereka terhadap kepada Bung Karno waktu itu, saat itu juga si Laban diundang dan memberikan pandangan mengenai posisi yang baik buat GBK. Jadi salah satu pilihannya adalah pertama di Kemayoran, yang kedua adalah di kawasan Duku Atas, jadi antara Tamrin dan Sudirman. Yang ketiga adalah di lokasi yang kita kenal sebagai GBK sekarang, di kawasan Senayan. Yang lokasi pertama itu memang problematik karena kita harus menguruk rawa-rawa yang begitu banyak sehingga biayanya bisa jadi sangat-sangat membengkak. Yang kedua adalah kawasan Duku Atas yang memang dipilih oleh tim Uni Soviet. Waktu itu memang kritik terbesar datang dari Silaban karena kawasan itu adalah kawasan yang terbelah oleh jalan Tamrin dan Sudirman. Jadi sebuah kawasan yang independen seharusnya tidak boleh dipisahkan oleh sebuah jalan raya yang sangat sibuk. Jadi makanya kawasan GBK dipilih seperti yang kita kenal sekarang sebagai sebuah kawasan yang memang eksklusif, tapi juga di satu sisi juga berbaur dan juga menjadi backbone, tulang punggung pertumbuhan bagi kota Jakarta di masa sekarang.
Saya adalah Direktur Utama kawasan GBK untuk tahun 2015 sampai dengan 2020. Saya melihat kawasan ini sebagai salah satu contoh yang baik, meskipun contoh kecil, dari suatu proses perencanaan. Kawasan ini dibangun, disiapkan untuk Asian Games keempat tahun 1962. Dia hanya membutuhkan lahan kurang lebih 140 hektar. Tetapi pembebasan lahan pada waktu itu dilakukan dengan luasan mendekati 300 hektar. Artinya ada space yang sudah disiapkan untuk berkembang lebih jauh. Nah, dengan adanya space yang disiapkan untuk berkembang lebih jauh, maka kemudian kawasan ini tumbuh menjadi satu ekosistem kawasan yang terintegrasi, di mana di dalamnya berisi ke satu kawasan Olympic Sports, jadi kelas Olimpik, sport kompleksnya. Kemudian juga ada fasilitas pendukung seperti hotel-hotel bintang 3 dan bintang 5 sampai bintang 5. Lalu juga ada convention, ada juga commercial office, dan ada juga residences, perumahan. Nah, ini adalah satu contoh perencanaan yang baik. Dengan demikian, maka kawasan ini menjadi suatu kawasan yang terintegrasi, yang juga dilengkapi dengan ruang terbuka hijau untuk publik. Maka pada tahun 2016 yang lalu, itu mulai dilakukan renovasi yang terbesar yang pernah ada di dalam sejarah sampai dengan hari ini untuk menyambut penyelenggaraan Asian Games ke-18 tahun 2018 yang lalu. Nah, dengan ini sudah direnovasi menjadi kawasan yang segar, maka kawasan ini tetap hidup dan ekosistemnya terbangun, berada dalam satu kompleks mixed use. Ini bisa menjadi contoh pengembangan ke depan. Saya mengharapkan jangan lagi kita merencanakan membangun kawasan olahraga di beberapa daerah atau kota di Indonesia, tetapi hanya membebaskan lahan, menyiapkan hanya untuk sportnya saja. Akibatnya setelah misalkan PON, banyak tempat-tempat yang dibangun itu yang kemudian dia tidak bisa tumbuh, mati. Nah, kawasan GBK ini adalah contoh yang baik, pembangunan dengan konsep make use, yang dia tetap hidup dan bisa mandiri, menghidupi dirinya sendiri.
GBK adalah Gelora Bung Karno, sebuah sports kompleks yang dimiliki oleh pemerintah Republik Indonesia. Tentu semua orang sudah tahu bahwa GBK sangat bersejarah. Berbagai kegiatan telah dilaksanakan di Indonesia, terutama di GBK, yakni Asian Games, SEA Games, Asian Para Games, Asian Football Cup, maupun kegiatan-kegiatan lainnya seperti konser-konser besar. Dalam visi kami, GBK harus menjadi tempat public space yang bisa dimanfaatkan oleh banyak orang, terutama untuk kegiatan sports, culture, art, education, entertainment. Dan kami percaya public space seperti GBK dapat memberikan dampak positif secara berkelanjutan kepada seluruh masyarakat Indonesia.
Tahun 2016, Ikatan Arsitek Indonesia Nasional yang saat itu diketuai oleh almarhum Ahmad Juhara menginisiasi untuk mencari prinsipal arsitek untuk merenovasi stadion-stadion ini untuk persiapan Asian Games 2018. Akhirnya terpilih 8 prinsipal arsitek untuk melakukan renovasi, mendesain, dan membuat bangunan baru di Kompleks Gelora Bung Karno. Untuk cabang olahraga bulu tangkis, Stadion Istora oleh Boy Birawa, Stadion Akuatik oleh Andra Matin, Stadion Madya oleh Maria Rosantina, Stadion Tenis Indoor dan Outdoor oleh Adi Purnomo, Stadion Softball dan Basket oleh Bambang Wicaksono, lapangan hoki, lapangan panahan, dan lapangan untuk latihan sepak bola oleh Dedi Wahyudi, Stadion Utama oleh Gregory Supelodi, saya sendiri. Kemudian ada 2 bangunan baru, 2 stadion baru di sini. Satu adalah untuk training facilities oleh Aji Negara, dan 1 stadion baru baseball oleh Maria Rosantina. Akhirnya seluruh kompleks ini bisa bekerja untuk cabang-cabang olahraga yang sudah ditetapkan untuk Asian Games 2018. Kompleks ini juga kemudian menjadi satu harmoni antara konsepsi lapangan olahraga dan konsep keseluruhan kawasan menjadi ruang publik. Saat Asian Games diperlukan juga sebuah cauldron, di mana cauldron itu adalah penanda acara Asian Games dimulai dan di mana apinya juga terus menyala selama acara Asian Games berlangsung. Didesain oleh Gregory Supelodi dan Sunario, sebuah kolaborasi antara arsitek dan seniman untuk membuat sebuah architectural public artwork yang sebagai penanda acara Asian Games di Indonesia tahun 2018. Juga setelah acara diharapkan bisa menjadi satu bagian public artwork dari seluruh kawasan kompleks ini.
Stadion Madya berdiri tahun 1961 adalah satu dari beberapa stadion heritage yang ada di Kompleks Gelora Bung Karno yang dirancang oleh tim dari Uni Soviet. Saat perancangan awal, Stadion Madya terdiri dari hanya adalah 2 tribun yang panjang dan sifatnya linier dan terpisah. Tidak ada koneksi antara 2 tribun lepas ini. Saat itu, fungsi Stadion Madya adalah sebagai stadion atletik, juga dipergunakan untuk mini soccer dan juga lapangan hoki. Pada perkembangannya telah terjadi renovasi fisik terhadap Stadion Madya setelah tahun 1961. Kondisi Stadion Madya menjadi dipagari, tidak bisa diakses dengan mudah dari dalam kompleks Gelora Bung Karno, lebih private, sehingga akses untuk ke Stadion Madya hanya bisa dari luar kompleks Gelora Bung Karno. Wujud Stadion Madya setelahnya terlihat karakter linier yang memanjang dan ekspresi struktur yang diekspos menjadi tidak nampak lagi akibat renovasi yang dilakukan. Sehingga untuk perencanaan Asian Games tahun 2018 ini, renovasi yang akan dilakukan, saya rasa mestinya harus mengembalikan jiwa Stadion Madya pada prinsip yang awal. Saat Asian Games tahun 2018, renovasi Stadion Madya dilakukan untuk memenuhi standar Stadion Atletik Internasional. 2 hal syarat utama yang harus dilakukan adalah memberikan atap Selain juga peningkatan terhadap fields of play, juga adalah membuat seat Stadion Madia menjadi sebuah single seat, di mana stadion existing dulunya hanya sepertiga dari satu tribun yang teratapi, maka harus membuat sebuah atap baru. Strategi memberikan atap pada Stadion Madia adalah dengan memberikan jarak dari bangunan existing, di mana ritme kolom yang baru dibuat satu ritme dengan kolom deretan kolom-kolom lama. Pada bagian fasad, saya merekonstruksi fasad bagian atas, di mana louver ini ada di perencanaan tahun 1961. Nah, fasad ini berupa louver juga berguna untuk sirkulasi udara di sirkulasi bagian atas. Untuk bagian bawah, sengaja dibuat sebuah layer yang semi-transparent, di mana layer ini bisa terbuka, bisa folded, bisa terbuka, sehingga fungsi-fungsi yang ada di bawah tribun nanti saat Stadion Madia tidak dipakai untuk sebuah perhelatan olahraga, nah ini bisa terbuka dan bagian dalamnya bisa berubah fungsi menjadi fungsi yang lain. Pada saat renovasi tahun 2018, saya membuat dua entry point untuk masuk ke Stadion Madia ini, di mana dua box ini terlepas dari tribun bangunan lama. Dua konektor ini menjadi sebuah, selain penghubung, juga menjadi pelindung bagi sirkulasi penonton dan juga atlet yang memakai dua tribun ini. Saya berada di konektor Stadion Madia. Konektor ini menghubungkan tribun barat dan tribun timur, berfungsi untuk sirkulasi atlet atau officer, dan juga sirkulasi penonton dari tribun barat atau dari entry gate menuju tribun yang berseberangan. Selain menjadi konektor dan berfungsi sebagai sirkulasi penonton dan juga atlet ini, dengan memiliki enclosure ini, maka Stadion Madia bisa menjadi sebuah stadion yang mempunyai enclosure atau tertutup, sehingga saat Stadion Madia tidak mempunyai gate, gitu, tidak terpisah-pisah, maka hal ini akan mendukung konsep besar kompleks GBK sebagai sebuah ruang publik yang terbuka tanpa harus mempunyai pagar masing-masing dari setiap stadion ini. Saya berada di tribun barat di atas podium VVIP. Podium VVIP ini ada setelah perencanaan tahun 1961. Karena saya merasa ini kehadiran podium ini penting sebagai untuk melengkapi fungsi Stadion Madia sebagai stadion atletik, maka podium ini tetap dipertahankan. Area duduk di antara tangga podium ini menjadi area yang kill seat, sehingga area ini bench lama, gitu, bench kayu lama, saya pilih untuk tetap hadir di sini sebagai sebuah jejak memori terhadap stadion ini. Juga sebagai sebuah pemenuhan standar stadion ini, kursi-kursi untuk difabel diletakkan di bagian bawah. Nah, terlihat juga untuk atap pada perencanaan lama hanya sepertiga tribun itu teratapi, jadi pada bagian belakang saja. Maka pada perencanaan yang baru terlihat detail pertemuan atap lama dan atap baru dibuat terlepas, tidak bertemu, dan saya mentreatment atap lama sebagai sebuah pengakhiran dari tribun, dibolongin, dilubangi gitu, sehingga desain atap lama dengan atap baru menjadi sebuah satu kesatuan yang harmonis.
Stadion utama ini secara posisi maupun secara luasan memang dia menjadi pusat dari keseluruhan kompleks kawasan Gelora Bung Karno, di mana seluruh kawasan ini berorientasi kemudian ke stadion utama ini. Di sekelilingnya ada trek yang cukup besar yang mengelilingi stadion utama kurang lebih 1 kilometer, yang kemudian menjadi tempat yang paling favorit untuk orang-orang bisa berolahraga mengelilingi stadion. Ide awalnya gate diletakkan di depan kawasan sehingga memang seluruh tempat ini bisa terakses dengan baik kecuali memasuki area tribun dan lapangan. Tapi dengan berbagai pertimbangan untuk safety acara tersebut dan lain-lain, akhirnya gate diletakkan di sini. Untuk membuat bangunan ini lebih inklusif, baik tidak hanya di lantai dasar tapi kemudian di lantai-lantai lainnya, waktu itu kami mengusulkan membuat sebuah ramp, 5 titik ramp dengan kemiringan yang sangat landai sesuai dengan standar, sehingga akhirnya tidak hanya lantai dasar menjadi publik, tapi kemudian lantai 1, 2, dan 3, 4 lapis ini kemudian bisa sangat mudah diakses secara inklusif oleh semua orang, baik disabilitas atau orang tua, sehingga bisa berjalan lebih mudah. Jadi memang idenya adalah menambahkan struktur baru dan ramp hampir di sekeliling bangunan, tidak menyentuh bangunan lama, tapi dia sebagai akses baru selain tangga-tangga yang sudah terjadi existing. Jadi dibayangkan apabila tidak hanya lantai dasar, tapi semua lapis di luar yang cukup besar ini bisa menjadi area publik baru, dan publik bisa mengelilingi tempat ini dan melihat seluruh kawasan secara 360 derajat dari semua sisi dengan lebih mudah. Bayangkan kalau semua level ini bisa menjadi satu public area dan ada akses dari luar yang inklusif bisa mencapai tempat ini, di mana kita bisa melihat 360 derajat view kawasan dari semua sisi stadion utama. Memang terjadi diskusi panjang dan perdebatan panjang dengan Heritage Board yang pada akhirnya ide ini tidak bisa dilaksanakan demi menjaga keutuhan dari unsur heritage dari bangunan stadion utama ini. Desain awal dari tim Soviet saat itu, desain tidak seperti ini, tapi lebih mirip dengan Stadion Luzhniki di Soviet, di mana kolom-kolom itu lurus, kemudian atap menempel di tepian kolom. Atas masukan arsitek Silaban kepada Bung Karno saat itu, bagaimana membuat stadion ini lebih tropis, akhirnya desainnya dirubah dengan tritisan yang cukup panjang, dengan cantilever yang cukup panjang, agar menaungi bangunannya terhadap iklim tropis di Indonesia. Dan kemudian kolom akhirnya sedikit dimiringkan ke dalam sebagai komposisi terhadap atap yang menjorok keluar dan keseluruhan bangunan. Saat itu stadion ini menjadi satu konstruksi beton terbesar di Indonesia, di mana dimulainya konstruktivisme dan arsitektur modern Indonesia dengan menggunakan teknologi beton. Desain awal tribun VIP terletak di sisi timur, di mana waktu itu Presiden Soekarno membuka Asian Games keempat di tribun ini. Tapi kemudian di masa era Presiden Soeharto, VIP tribun dipindahkan ke sisi barat dan dibuat lebih besar dengan merubah tribun-tribun penonton menjadi satu VIP yang cukup besar di sisi barat. Seiring berjalannya waktu, saat renovasi untuk Asian Games 2018, ruang-ruang sekelilingnya yang tadinya adalah supporting secara analog untuk stadion ini bisa sebagian kita rubah menjadi skybox atau VIP room untuk supporting sponsor dan lain-lain untuk event Asian Games maupun event pertandingan olahraga di stadion ini. Termasuk scoring board yang tadinya analog, yang awalnya analog, kemudian saat diganti digital, ruang bawahnya yang tadinya untuk scoring tim bisa kita manfaatkan untuk ruang-ruang supporting untuk kegunaan stadion ini. Desain awalnya kursi stadion ini adalah bench kayu dengan kapasitas 100.000 penonton. Kemudian kita harus mengubah menjadi single seats dengan standar Asian Games yang baru menjadi kapasitas 77.193 seats. Sebagai stadion nasional atau national stadium, bagaimana kemudian desain kursi ini bisa menggambarkan identitas Indonesia. Terinspirasi dari bendera kita yang dililitkan, dia menjadi jalinan merah dan putih yang menggambarkan sportivitas, semangat yang menggelora, sesuatu yang dinamis, yang kemudian mengisi bangunan yang putih dan netral. Di dalamnya adalah semangat yang menggelora, yang menggambarkan identitas dari bangsa Indonesia. Salah satu yang spesial dari desain stadion ini adalah desain atapnya, di mana dia cantilever kedua arah, sisi ke arah depan dan sisi cantilever panjang untuk menutupi tribun. Seluruh cantilever atap ini ditopang oleh struktur baja yang diekspos dan kemudian diikat oleh struktur temu gelang yang menjaga stabilitas dari cantilever atap ini di sekeliling stadion. Di masanya struktur temu gelang ini adalah sesuatu yang baru dan Indonesia bisa memiliki stadion yang megah dengan skala yang besar dengan sistem struktur yang saat itu termasuk avant-garde dan baru. Sekarang kita berada di atap stadion utama GBK. Pada struktur temu gelang yang mengikat dan menstabilkan atap cantilever dari keseluruhan stadion ini. Dan selama renovasi, kita menambahkan satu struktur tension cable di bawahnya untuk keperluan lighting, speaker, karena menambahkan beban baru terhadap atap struktur yang lama. Struktur gelang ini juga berfungsi sebagai catwalk untuk keperluan maintenance lighting dan atap untuk keseluruhan stadion. Saya sebagai koordinator arsitek untuk proses desain renovasi ini mencoba tetap menjaga bersama teman-teman, menjaga keseluruhan konsepsi ini agar masing-masing stadion baik yang direnovasi karena bangunan heritage dan bangunan baru memiliki satu benang merah arsitektural yang masih kita jaga sebagai sebuah harmoni kawasan Gelora Bung Karno yang baru.
Dengan mengucap Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, Asian Games ke-18 tahun 2018 saya nyatakan dibuka.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Back to Nikhil.
Thank you very much to you both. Amazing transformation, and I can say that you feel me very proud to be an Asian again. I live very near to an Asian stadium in New Delhi, which was I think in 1984, and I used to pass every day when I used to go to school and look at the stadium, and it was a major thing for New Delhi when they hosted in 1984 the Asian Games. and looking at your transformation and what you have done to a 1962 modern structure, I think you have enhanced the significance. I can say that for me, it's not just you have preserved the significance, but you have even enhanced the significance and still keeping the Indonesian identity. I mean, it's 2 thumbs up for the wonderful work.
下个是我。
Yeah, thank you very much for such a fantastic presentation. And since we are running a bit late, I'm going to stop here and invite our next speaker, who is a good friend and a colleague from Singapore, Weng. He's a conservation consultant, and we work together on projects. We are working currently on a project together. He's a passionate conservation architect and activist as well, I can say. Very passionate and to save Singapore's modern architecture, and he's a member of Dokumomo and other international organizations. And like I said, very passionately trying very hard to save some of the very important modern buildings of Singapore. And as I said earlier, rapid urbanization in places like Singapore, these buildings are really at risk. So Weng, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Nikhil. Good evening, everyone. I'm very happy to be here to present this short video. Actually, my role in the video is very minimal, although they say I provided guidance, but it's really the voice of the younger generation who feel passionately about modern architecture and heritage in Singapore. And they will actually like to use this video to make another argument besides the heritage value, to use environmental sustainability to relook at the value of this what many see as older, obsolete concrete buildings. And I will not say too much, and I will leave you to enjoy the video. Thank you.
The 2016 Paris Agreement reflects a global consensus to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, attain a net zero carbon future, and to contain this century's global temperature rise within 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. However, within the built environment industry, a compliance of all newly constructed buildings designed to LEED Platinum levels will still result in a 3 degrees Celsius rise in global temperature. Today, 3 leading industry practitioners give their take on the issue, urging us to save both our environment and our heritage, to stop architectural deforestation before it is all too late.
In the context of the built environment, when we look at this study, you find that there is a particular concept that actually does not exist in nature, and that is waste. Nothing is wasted in the natural environment. Everything is circular. Demolishing an existing building which has got reasonable lifespan in it and rebuilding another one is tantamount to creating artificial waste. The whole concept is wasteful.
In fact, not just buildings of this era, but you will see that buildings that last for hundreds, thousands of years, they were built without heavy reliance on artificial systems, right? I mean, they are very they're handmade, right? They are low tech, but they have stood the test of time. In fact, the ironic thing is whatever we have built in the last maybe 80, 90 years in concrete is not as lasting as buildings that were built in timber and brick, right? Or stone.
I would question some of those things that create that value system. That what makes it cheaper to demolish a building? Why is it cheaper to destroy something before we build something else? There may be something wrong with that measure. So it's a distorted value system that we currently have, which sort of distorts everything else that we do.
One of the most effective alternatives to arresting global temperature rise is upgrading and retrofitting existing buildings, especially high-rise concrete modernist megastructures, as opposed to demolishing them and erecting new ones. Indeed, the greenest building is the one already built. The key to unlocking the atrocities of building demolition is understanding their embodied carbon dioxide.
retaining a building will significantly reduce your embodied carbon footprint. Even if an existing building, you remove everything else, keep the structural frame, you've already saved 5 to 600 kilograms of CO2 per square meters. That is significant.
To build a typical 40-story reinforced concrete megastructure, approximately 51 million kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalent is emitted into the atmosphere, the same amount of carbon dioxide sequestered by 8.75 million trees. If it is virtuous to preserve 10,000 hectares of forest, it is better to retain such a structure. Demolition wastes away the already embodied carbon dioxide of existing structures, and rebuilding further consumes carbon dioxide in the production of new building materials. As such, tearing down a 40-story concrete megastructure is akin to burning down a forest.
So we know that concrete buildings embody energy and huge carbon footprint by their sheer size and scale, right? And especially in the context of Singapore being a compact city-state, many of such buildings occupy our skyline, and you can imagine the knock-on impact if actually we can come up with a more environmentally sustainable way to redevelop rather than tear down and rebuild. So this increasingly has become one of the key arguments for conservation of modern movement heritage.
Indeed, often referred to as ugly, rundown, and seen as urban blights, large concrete modernist structures are primarily perceived at surface value. People are reluctant to look beyond these labels to see what they can offer. And the rate at which modernist buildings in Singapore are being demolished is a case for concern for both environmentalists and heritage enthusiasts.
One of the biggest challenges that we see or rather we face in promoting this paradigm shift, be it in Singapore or even globally, is really mindset. And the part about mindset that I think is most key for us to move away from is about indifference or worse, denial.
They're also part of our collective memories, and demolishing them can have the effect of alienating people. There are cultural aspect of existing buildings. It shows that you look at a building, you look at the past. You look at the past, you learn from the wisdom of the past. Looking at the past also helps you understand why it is that we are doing some of the things that we are doing in the present time. And looking at the past not only helps us see the past, see the present, it also helps us see the future. So every time you demolish a building, it's like burning a book on history. You know, you just deprive the future generations from reading about the past, seeing the past, or going to a building and experiencing.
One of the difficulty in conserving modernist building is the perception, right? Perception that they are not worthy of conservation. First of all, they are still relatively young compared to older buildings. Second is perception of the aesthetics, because unlike older buildings, they are not as ornamented or easy to appreciate, right? So you end up having skeptics who feel that they're not beautiful, so why should we keep them? The third difficulty, I think, is the condition of these buildings, which adds to the undesirability of how they appear. And it's not just appearance, it's also inconvenience of people who have to deal with the poor condition the buildings are in, generally because of poor maintenance. So one way to overcome the aesthetic debate is to focus on what is at the core of the issue, which is to widen the discussion to a broader discussion, and in this case it's about the climate crisis, right? And also environmental sustainability.
But at a practical level, most buildings have the inherent ability for them to be adapted and adopted into the new design, integrated in a new development, and we must find it mandatory for ourselves, and ideally policymakers would make it mandatory, that we must explore all those opportunities, all those possibilities of retaining the building, integrating it into the new, to make it relevant so that it is not obsolete.
there are factors that influence how decision making swings towards retention and rehabilitation. So to give you an example, a recent case is the OUE downtown, which is a retrofit of the old DBS tower and podium. We found out that since 1970s, when it was first designed, there's already quite forward thinking of incorporating some flexibility of change of use through the layout, through the planning, and through the structural design strategy. So I guess things like this help developer to in the assessment whether or not it's a better option to keep the building and retrofit or to tear down and rebuild. So flexibility is one factor.
Very good example of how this collaboration between private sector and authorities can take place can potentially be seen in a recent article of the call for the redevelopment of the Golden Mile complex. So what's exciting is this whole refreshing approach to look at development by prioritizing conservation first to start. I think the second part is in the support of that, the kind of adjustments in regulation and the added incentive that the planning agencies are putting in to encourage this shifts in thinking and approach to development. I would say if this project can come out successful, it will set the stage for a lot of such alternative approach to come.
So it's definitely a good test case if it's taken up for testing this idea of green retrofit, pushing the envelope of this green retrofit, so that for once something quite definitive can be done, like calculating the amount of carbon footprint and embodied energy in its existing structure and fabric, right? And then after the conversion, how does it all work out?
In Singapore, the Green Mark certification scheme is a green building rating system designed to evaluate a building's environmental impact and performance. Since 2008, Green Mark certification is mandatory for all new buildings and existing buildings undergoing major retrofits.
One of the primary instruments was our Green Mark scheme. And of course, still active. That was introduced, not wrong, in January 2005. So quite incredible, almost 15 years in the making. And it has also evolved into, I would say, the latest measures of pushing towards super low energy kind of building, idea of zero waste. And I think these are all the various mechanisms that are in place to allow the entire industry, not just in terms of raising awareness, but laying out concrete plan for tangible action. But there's a big but. We all know that more can be done.
Currently in BCA Green Mark considerations, scoring is not really given to the fact that embodied energy actually is captured. We're choosing not to demolish the structure.
Green Mark, LEED certification are part of those positive movements, positive actions that we have taken as within the industry. Are they good? Yes. Are they good enough? No.
Like I said, the signs are clear, and the signs behind this pandemic crisis are also very evident. So it's very important that, again, as part of the larger fraternity, be it it's not just the state or the architects, but the developers, the builders, and all stakeholders of the industry needs to really come together.
Construction Declares is a movement that started around middle of last year, 2019. It started by a declaration made by 17 Sterling Prize winning architects out of the UK to declare that they believed the situation was critical, threat to the climate, threat to biodiversity was reaching and has reached a critical stage, and urgent actions need to be made by everyone, in that case, the architects and practitioners within the built environment.
Obviously, the whole idea of this banding together with fellow friends and fraternity is to advocate for faster change. And then together we share knowledge, and then we look at what are better and more responsible way of, say, be it design, or be it construction, or even be it about maintaining buildings, or looking at even preserving buildings as an alternative approach.
I do think that as this issue of climate crisis becomes more urgent, as we really can feel it, we have to really stop skirting the issue and start to embrace this as a challenge that needs to be actively addressed.
Once the mind is open to such shifts, I think the rest will follow, right? And the change, we all know, always create a lot of discomfort and disruption to start.
Demolition must really be the very, very, very last resort after having explored all other opportunities, because it is like burning a book, it is like burning a forest, and these are bad things.
If the fundamental premise of architecture and design is to address the challenges facing humanity, and in this case, climate change, then how can we even fathom tearing down buildings and structures which are still well and good? If large-scale forest fires worry you, then the demolition of buildings, of which we are often so indifferent to, should unsettle us much, much more.
Right. Thank you very much. I like I said, I know Weng very well, and the rest of the other two speakers in the video, and I know they are very, very passionate about this cause, and we all should be, actually, because if you know Singapore, then the things were not quite good here for several years, I must say, but the agencies and the people are now opening up their mind, and things are changing slowly. And I would like to ask Wengen if he wants to talk. I think Moritz asked some questions about the GMC. Do you want to explain a little bit about your involvement with GMC and how this all started?
Maybe Nikhil, we can. I'm definitely happy to give more context to this video. This is actually a video that is supported also by Docomo Singapore, and one of the key tenets of Docomo Singapore is to actually have a more positive look at the future of retaining modernist buildings. Why we feel this is quite an important challenge for Singapore to take on is because we are a complex city state with very high density, high rise built environment, and almost 80% of what we see today is a result of the past 50 years. Okay? Although we have a so-called 200 years of colonial history stretching back to colonial era. So much modern landscapes, buildings, and sites have been built since post-war, right? Where if we mark that as one of the milestones. It's an unfortunate scenario in the past 10 or 15 years that there is this collective sales fever driven very much by developers wanting to shore up their land banks, and of course residents who would like to cash out on their aging properties that they are no longer wanting to maintain and keep. Okay, so it becomes a vicious cycle of buildings getting sold to developer who will tear it down and build more high-rise, more intensive developments in its place. Some of these buildings that are torn down are maybe less than 20 years old. So that has a huge knock-on impact, because there's so much of such built substance, and they are always without enough study on the significance, they can easily get torn down. Right. So these are some of the background. to the video, and I actually would have more to share, but I don't want to hold up the last speaker's time. I think there will be more debates during the discussion during the Q&A later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Weng, and thank you very much for slightly more detailed background about what's happening in Singapore. And okay, so last but not the least, we have a very interesting project, and personally I want to look into it because I've never been to Germany, and I was so looking forward for the exhibition and everything, but unfortunately the situation is still not very good, so I can't travel. But I have heard so much about this project. So I would like to invite Konrad Braun and Manfred Kühne for the next presentation, which is the House of Statistics from Demolition Plan to Future Project. So the screen is yours.
Then maybe I have to start again. To introduce myself, I'm working for the Senate of Berlin. That's the citywide government. And our administration has the status of the Ministry of the Federal State of Berlin, and has tasks of a municipality. We are in charge of major inner city urban development projects. This picture gives us an overview over the oldest part of Berlin that was heavily destroyed in World War II, and in many areas completely demolished in the post-war area, because here was created one of the most outstanding ensembles of post-war modernism in Europe, as the center of a socialist capital of the GDR, the German Democratic Republic in the East. The wall came down 30 years ago, but even today we have very controversial discussions about the development of these parts of the city, where we have to cope with the heritage of 8 centuries, and especially the big structures of the 1970s, when not only the television tower, today the landmark of reunified Berlin, but also very huge ensembles were created in the context of the international modernism, and influenced as well from the Soviet Union as from designers as Le Corbusier and his Unité d'habitation. The next slide, please. For more than 20 years, no political decisions were made because we have in the civil society in Berlin 3 major fields of activists. On the one hand, we have conservative activists who dream of a reconstruction of the lost historic center of Berlin, to recreate small streets, to redesign small buildings, private buildings on small premises. We have a second field of activists who tell us with very good arguments that this ensemble of the 1970s is worth to be preserved and to be evaluated today. And there is a third field of activists that tell us nostalgia is not the solution for such an inner city area, not the nostalgia for a lost city, and also not the nostalgia for the modernism of a socialist state. And as a result, we organized a very profound participation process. We had more than a year, and we discussed guidelines for this area. And because the political decision makers did not dare to decide the future of this site and the surrounding areas, we could create citizen guidelines for the development of this area. And as a result, we now have also the political decisions that this huge open green field that has no name, no established name, will be also developed as a green space in the future. There will be no privatization, there will no reconstruction of historic features, and also the main existing building complexes from the 1970s around it will be preserved. And we have very good conditions for that because although we had two major privatization campaigns in Berlin, one immediately when the wall came down in the 1990s, and one a second in the early 2000 years when Berlin had a profound budget crisis. But even today, all buildings and quarters around the television tower are city-owned premises. We have two major institutions, city-owned housing company, WBM, and we have real estate, city-owned real estate company that is in charge of the management and development of all public buildings. So we have special conditions not only to decide politically, but also on the management level, what will be the future of these inner city areas. The next slide. As a result of this and other participation processes, we today, after 4 decades of experiences in participation, we also maintain permanent spaces for the urban debate and the participation. We present our projects, we discuss them with the public, we are looking for co-creation initiatives, and we encourage initiatives from civil society. This is Stadtwerkstatt, city workshop, literally translated. It's established in one of these post-war buildings immediately in front of the television tower. And that's a place where we can organize and encourage citizen involvement and co-creation processes in top-down mode. The next slide. In the case of Haus der Statistik, we have a completely different history. You see this picture with the existing urban structures close to Alexanderplatz. And here you see a development project from the early 1990s. After the wall came down, everybody expected Berlin would experience an extremely intensive economic boom. And as a result, we were in charge to create a high-rise central business district project. And the major developers from all over the world came and wanted to start this development. But instead of this economic boom, for 20 years, Berlin was the hub of unemployment in Germany. And we experienced statistically a very high, a very profound process of economic stagnation. So up to now, none of these towers was constructed, and we had almost 20 years to think about such an extreme changing process. And one of the results is the project Haus der Statistik. The next, please. A closer look to the slides here. It's a huge office building and buildings for the technical infrastructure, the IT infrastructure, immediately at the central Alexanderplatz. At the moment, we have the expected economic boom. In a few years, Berlin developed after 2010 as one of the major startup hubs in Europe. And now we face an unexpected and profound gentrification process in the city. As a result, the city government changed its urban development and real estate policies completely, from a complete sell-out strategy to a strategy where we try to buy and to steer as owners as many sites as possible, also in the inner city. That's why the city of Berlin bought this area that was a property of the federal government. And today we have a very mixed development process around Alexanderplatz. The first high-rise buildings are under construction. Many housing areas that are property of the city of Berlin are preserved as affordable house, as part of the affordable housing stock. Major part of the quarters of the 1960s are, and many prominent buildings of the 1970s are listed as heritage. And there is even an initiative to bring Karl Marx Alley with its Stalinist part and its modernist part from the 1960s, and as well a housing area from the same period in the western part of the inner city on the World Heritage List. Berlin has already successfully brought 7 housing estates from the 1920s, from the classical modernist period, on the World Heritage List. And we would like to add these areas. And in the middle of these very different kind of urban development and conservation approaches, Haus der Statistik is our most experimental project, because we want to bring activists from the civil society and city-owned companies that have no or few experiences with innovative and cooperative urban development projects. The next slide, please. Here you can see the 5 cooperation partners. I don't know why our administration is on the top. We are not the most important. We have the borough administration, the central borough Mitte. We have the initiative of the civil society that is organized as today as ZKM. If you translate it literally, it is you can in Germany it has the meaning of coming together. Zusammenkunft Berlin. We have the city-owned housing company that is owner of the most housing areas around. And we have as a 5th cooperation partner the already mentioned city-owned real estate company that is constructing and maintaining and offering administration buildings. 4 of these partners will be future tenants on the project side. Our task, my mission is to encourage innovation and to give additional funding when needed, because we know all these partners have to cooperate in a long-standing planning and experimental process, and they cannot trust on established governance and models of financing. We started with this cooperation in 2016 when the city government bought the premise, and the governing coalition of 3 parties gave us the mission to start this process. The next slide, please. This is an overview. Nobody can tell what it will mean of the organization of the 2 first years of cooperation. In the end, we will pass a decade of cooperation, and you see we have a structure for the project management, we have a structure for the planning, and that's very closely connected to participation processes. And sometimes even we 5 cooperation partners are puzzled how to deal with all these influences and all these steps of collaboration. The next slide, please. But we are lucky that we were, for German conditions, quite fast with the elaboration of a urban design scheme. I mentioned it, the office buildings from the 1970s will be integrated. That's the only private property building from the listed building from the 1910 years. And that will be an area where the city-owned company will create new affordable housing. We have experimental buildings, and there should be an additional high-rise building, as it's called City Hall of the Future. It's meant to be a city hall for the borough of Mitte, of the central district, because today the administration is renting private properties and cannot afford to do that in the future. You see, we want also adapt public spaces in the huge streetscapes around it in an innovative way, and we want to create intimate and attractive interior spaces for the local communities and the broad public very close at Alexanderplatz. And we want to mix functions as far as possible in all these projects. The next slide, please. That's an overview of the functions. We will have very standard regular function. For example, the tax administration will be come here, and the city-owned real estate company will have offices here. We will have the housing part, the innovative city hall that is meant to be timber structure, and everywhere we try to mix functions, spaces that are meant to be given to the civil society, to social and cultural initiatives, and we introduced these functions from the beginning in the ruins of the empty house, the statistic building. The next one. This process to invite pioneers from the beginning to bring the activists that successfully rallied for the complexity and the orientation of the project as a towards common goods is the most innovative part of our project. That's why the second part of the presentation will be given by Konrad Braun, who is part of this movement. We have a steering committee that initiatives, activists, experienced cultural and social projects can apply to become temporarily and in the future permanently hosts in this building, and to influence the development on an eagle footage. And you see that's an approach to bring vital urban life from the beginning into the building and the planning process. The next slide. So already today, when we are in the first phase of the development of decision making and steering the regeneration project, the activated ruins of Haus der Statistik, where you can read alles anders Platz. In German, it does mean all different side, is bringing aesthetically and with the many activities a sharp contrast to the regular retail and urban development activities and projects that we have in the surrounding. I hope my short remarks can give you a certain idea in which context we are operating. And now I want to ask Konrad Braun to continue to present his initiative and to explain some further aspects of our projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Manfred Kühne. I'm Konrad Braun, and I'm a board member of the corporation who's who's working together with the cooperation partners who are already mentioned from Herrn Kühne. Next slide, please. As you can see here, the National Office of Statistics is one of the good examples of the modernist socialist architecture without the status of historic preservation, where we take the opportunity now to transform the whole architectural ensemble from the late 60s. Next slide, please. I brought you some examples from the past. So when we're looking back at the past to the wonderful examples of modernist socialist architecture in the city center of Berlin, especially around House of Statistics, we had the Palace of the Republic. You can see it here, a picture from 1986. Also the Ministry of Foreign Affairs from the GDR in 1969. And also the Great Maple Leaf Restaurant, designed and built by the structural engineer Ulrich Müder, as known as the master of organic architecture in the GDR. Next slide, please. So he lost these, I would say, flagships of modern socialist architecture. The Palace of the Republic, demolished in 2008, and also the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 1995, and also these Great Maple Leaf Restaurant in 2000, for several reasons. Next slide, please. And now we transformed, or we will be transformed to the reconstruction of the Berlin Palace, so-called Humboldt Forum, finished in 2020. The reconstruction of the building palace, was built up 200 years ago from Schinkel. And here we can see on the left side a new construction of the hotel called Novotel on the same location of the Great Maple Leaf Restaurant. Next slide, please. Since 2008, House of Statistics was vacant because of the financial crisis, a substantial cut in the key interest rate on the financial market, and other several reasons. And now it's not waiting for a revival anymore. Next slide, please. But what is the main difference to the lost icons of modernist socialist architecture? In 2015, an alliance of endangered Berlin art studios decided to play an active role in the game of city development and occupy the facade of House A to communicate the basic needs of art and culture professionals, especially to affordable social cultural spaces. What you can see here is a protest action who advertise spaces for art, culture, and social activities in the name of the Berlin Senate. This action illustrates the starting point of a discussion about the future in our project here, and brought together a number of powerful institutions in the field of urban development policies. Next slide, please. After these successful action, I would say, the initiative, working on several concepts and studies, discussed the details with the Senator of Finance, and summarize the spatial needs of all stakeholders into a main offer to the politicians, administration, and civil society. This offer was supported by local politicians and led to some serious decisions in the Parliament of Berlin. Next slide, please. And what you can see here, we call it open network meetings. So the decision-making process was followed by a number of open network meetings, next, and gives the initiatives the political power and legal options, next, to cooperate with the Senate, the district, and the state-owned companies or the city-owned companies as a fifth partner in this project. To be a legal partner, the initiative formed a cooperative called ZKB, not ZKM, as a governor as the governor of the demands of the civil society. Next. The basis of the cooperation has been regulated by so-called cooperation agreements since January 2018. The cooperation agreements are flanked by financing agreements. And in the meantime, the third agreement has been signed, which regulates the basis of the cooperation until the conclusion of the zoning plan procedure. Next. All partners are following the goal defined in the coalition agreement of the state of Berlin to develop the House of Statistics as a place for administration, as well as for culture, education, social affairs, and housing. Next. The basis for a successful cooperation was born, and the first pioneers entered the space, as you can see here. Next. An on-site office as a co-production zone was opened. Next. The collaborative planning process was continued. Next. And a diverse range of participation formats bring all demands together. Next. So several vacant spaces in the ground floor were activated by the pioneers. For example, here, the Center for Circular Economy. Next. Projects like urban gardening or social street work in the public space. Next. And also offers for the neighborhood like cooking, dancing, space for young people, and other groups without a strong voice in the urban development policies. Next. Today, you can see here the timeline of the whole project since the late 60s until now. And now in the year 2021, the question is, what is modern movement in architecture and urban development outside the function of representation and heritage? For us, it's not the question of top-down or bottom-up. The answer for us is to find new ways of cooperation between all stakeholders and decision makers at eye level, a cooperative city planning, and also a co-production of space. And for that, we need to develop new forms of urban governance, new forms of shared responsibility and new forms of collective ownership or use of land. But we will have a lot of challenges in the ongoing cooperation process for the next years. And the next goals of the initiative and also the cooperation as an agent for the interest of the civil society are, on the one hand, the public-civil partnership and cooperation between equal partners. These 5 partners are already mentioned. A long-term financially independent operation of the different building projects. Affordable spaces for social and cultural activities, housing, education, and many other common uses. And last but not least, land protection with the legal framework of a leasehold. That means that the public hand will remain the owner of the land, and the initiative gets the right of use for the next 99 years. So these are the positions of the initiative right now, and we will negotiate this offers or this challenges together in the next few months with all players on the level of the public hand. So that is a short insight to the processes inside the Haus der Statistik, the point of view of the civil society. And if you have any other questions or wants to discuss with us together the future of your project, you feel free to contact us. I will give you some context later on in the chat. So thank you. And now we can open the discussion. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, both Konrad and Manfred. Means, what do I say? I mean, I have no words. You know, you people are you're so passionate, and I mean, I have so many questions. I mean, I want you both to come to Singapore tomorrow, if possible, because I think we all can learn and so much that from city of Berlin. To be honest, that how can you manage this sort of thing? Because I can tell you in Singapore, I mean, it's all about money. So if you cannot generate money, then the building has to go. Simple as that. So if we say that we want to do all these things, what you people are doing in House of Statistics is a kind of, for me, I'm not a Singaporean, to be honest. I've only lived here for 10, 12 years. But for me, it's not possible. So I want to know. I mean, I will ask this maybe personally later for the email and all, and hopefully I can. So I want to learn all these things because when I teach about these things, community participation and the economics and everything in my university, in my department here, to students about architectural conservation, it all boils down to dollars. That who is going to pay, why the city is going to pay. You know what they get out of these old buildings. So I think I'll stop here again. But thank you very much for such a wonderful a real case study, and so that we know that it is not impossible. It might take some time, but if your heart is at the right place, things are possible. And of course, it has to be a collaborative effort from the agencies like the City of Berlin and the civil societies. They have to think kind of they have to have a similar vision. And if the vision is good, I think the things will fall into place. So thank you very much again for the wonderful presentation. So now I open the floor for Q&A. We are right at the time. I mean, this is perfect. You know, we are 2 minutes ahead actually. So I love that, and I love that when we have this sort of situation. So questions. Let me check the chat. Moritz, how are we going to take the questions? Is it because, I mean, if I have to go all through the thing, is people are going to ask the questions here? They can unmute themselves and ask the questions themselves, right?
Yes, they can raise their hands with these. You see the button at the button at the bottom right side, reaction, and there you can raise your hands, or like I do now.
Yeah.
Maybe I have a little comment to Nikhil.
Yeah.
You said that the process we are already mentioned in our presentation, it's not possible in Singapore. I'm not sure about that, because when you take
I said for now it's not possible. I mean, nothing is not impossible. You know, if people have open-minded, we are trying our best. I mean, people like Weng are trying their best. I mean, I'm a very teeny weeny part.
I do agree with you, Konrad. I share. I mean, I'm more optimistic than Nikhil.
Yes, that's good. So it's not impossible, but it is difficult at this point now. But things are changing for better.
Yeah,
because our Berlin experience
we'll
is to never waste a good crisis, and we had a permanent crisis from the early 1930s to the early 2010. Now we are challenged. For the first time since the 1920s, we are a boom town, and that's challenging us so much. And this boom came so suddenly that these projects are part of a therapeutic situation. We have so many experience with low budget and no budget projects, and now we want to save this world of creative no and low budget projects into a booming era, and that's very interesting, but it's also challenging.
I just want to give an advice to the Golden Mile complex, because when you take a look to the history of Singapore, especially to the Golden Mile complex, I went to Singapore 10 years ago, and we just make research together with the ETH Zurich and Kees Christianse about this fantastic building. And when you see the socio-economic structure of this building behind, and also the contracts in the legal framework, how they get the contracts for a leasehold, I would say, over 100 years. This is the reason why the Golden Mile complex is already exists now. So I think you just have to take a look to the history, also to the People's Park complex or other good examples in Singapore and in Southeast Asia, and learn from that and bring it to the present. Just one little comment to that.
Thank you very much, Konrad. Okay, so the floor is open. So if you have any questions, either you can raise your hand and unmute yourself and ask a question, or you can type it on the chat. And yes, Antoine, yes.
Well, first off, thank you, Nikhil and Moritz, for organizing this meeting. It was really fabulous. Thank you, speakers. Every presentation is just so interesting. I have a particular question for Konrad and Manfred. If you could maybe elaborate a little bit on who were the key stakeholders that you knew you had to engage with to have any chance of success for your project?
If I may start again, we in Berlin, we have a political coalition of 3 parties. At the moment, the Social Democrats are still the leading party. We have the Green Party and Die Linke, the former socialist party that has its roots in the East. And in these 3 parties, we have, from my point of view, if I'm allowed to say it from the point of view of the administration, we have a good mixture of openness towards business development and very high sensitivity towards social aspects. This coalition has to cope with an original sin. In the early 2000 years, like the city of Vienna, Berlin was the owner of an extremely huge social housing stocks from the 1920s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and in the early 2000 years, when Berlin seemed to be poor and in a stagnation forever, especially in a demographic stagnation, this coalition dared to sell most of these housing stocks. And Berliners rent their homes. 80% of Berliners rent their homes. And for a generation, it was very inexpensive. It was easy to get a huge, affordable home everywhere in the city. And now this coalition has to cope with its original sin. They gave away the commons. They gave away the security of the people of Berlin who rent their homes. That's the contrast. In every former socialist capital, people own their homes. In Moscow, in Warsaw, because there was a privatization to the tenants. In Berlin, it was a privatization to the cities. And when the cities committed this mistake to give away these properties, that they have to do something. And so they need initiatives, activists that have a high level of street credibility and can approve that we are not on such a shameful way anymore in urban development and real estate policy. That's my experience from the last 20, 30 years. Maybe Konrad has a different point of view, but...
I will just add something. For me, the opportunity to have a project like this here in Berlin is directly addressed to the financial crisis in 2008. So without this financial crisis and the political change on the level of the Berlin city, it's not possible to make a project like this here. And as I know, in Singapore, you have this HDB, the Housing Development Board. So the people in Singapore get their flat also in leasehold contracts, if I'm already leasehold contracts. And I think there's something around 85% of the people has their own flat in Singapore. So this is a completely different situation. And one other comment is we have a very strong civil society. We have lots of activists. We call it intermediary people who can negotiate between these different stakeholders and political interests. And this is one of the main bases, I would say, that the corporation, the ZKB, can work together with the city. And one last comment, I think what's really important is that you have an open heart and open mind to different perspectives. So you need to act in a, I would say, pluralistic world. And when all these people are working together and has one goal, then it's possible to make it to a kind of model project for other cities and other countries in the world.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. I hope it answers your question, Antoine.
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much. Just maybe one comment is that you may be familiar with the vanilla factory in Rotterdam. That used to be a factory, now has been preserved, but also is used now as a office space for people who work in the creative fields.
These are projects of reference for us. We're lucky we are not alone in Europe, in the European context. There, especially in the Netherlands, in Scandinavia, we have sometimes also in France.
Yeah, great.
Maybe I can add and confirm some things that Konrad Braun and Manfred Kühne said. So I think since the 70s, Berlin has a really strong civil society, which is related to the housing questions. As we had this very, very strong squatters movement, which became partly part of the International Building Exhibition in the 1980s. And so these discussions about housing and the need for housing space and apartments became and to how to renovate old buildings instead of tearing down became a huge part, or half of the part, of the International Building Exhibition in the 1980s. And I think this history continued later to when the wall fell down and a huge amount of space was available because nobody knew what to do with it and to whom this space belonged. And all the people came to Berlin, went into these spaces, made clubs out of it, working spaces, somehow moved into do whatever. So, and this is a kind of very positive tradition because these people don't want to leave the city now. So they and that's what they did in the House of Statistics. That what Konrad said, that the artists, for example, started with this initiative and put the poster on the facade of the building and declared themselves. They put the label of the city of Berlin on the poster. There's quite a funny detail in this. When they opposed against the city. And I think this is a very important part. And another part is, I think, that Berlin as a city lacks a little bit of, let's say, making plans for the future. And sorry for that, but so this gives open space to a lot of things. This goes hand in hand with this crisis Manfred Kühne and Konrad Braun described. And so there is no tough government as in Singapore that you have to follow, simply have to follow. So, like the squatters movement, I don't know if there are any, there might be a kind of informal settlement structure in some parts of Singapore, but it's, I think, no. Okay.
It's been mainly wiped out. No, I feel I have to respond since everyone is talking about Singapore, and I'll be really happy to, first I must really congratulate Manfred and Konrad on your and thank you for your wonderful presentation. In fact, I visited Berlin in 1998, and at the time it was just maybe less than 10 years when East Berlin was transformed. And I visited Tacheles, I remember. Is that how you pronounce it? The art center, Tacheles. Yes, where there were an artist colony. And at that time, I had a very good friend who was an exchange student. So it made such a big, deep impression that these former socialist buildings that are in almost a half-ruined state could be so creatively transformed and inhabited by artists. And they're making, having all kinds of events and activities there. And I mean, fast forward to, where we are now in Singapore. Konrad, you mentioned the Golden Mile complex as one of the very inspiring kind of building, both as an architectural statement as well as its ownership structure, right? This is, you're quite right. It is basically a multi-strata title. So every single unit is privately owned. Right, there is no, it is not a collective per se, but it's all private owners, right? So the vision, is very much driven by the government's Singapore government's early economy and nation building vision to renew the old city of city core of Singapore and to transform it into a forward-looking financial center, right? But now the sad thing is the very nature of its ownership, which is this multi-strata title, has also created a kind of problem in terms of maintenance, okay? Because the funds, the sinking funds that goes into maintaining the buildings gets depleted, and the individual owners can't agree what is the best way to maintain, and cut a long story short, basically the building began to be very undesirable to live in, right? One of the tenants were complaining about cockroaches inside his, what do you call that? The bathroom, the sewers, not sewer, the pipes, and their lift breaking down and things like that. But of course, these are not so much the issue of the architectural design or the urban environment. It's really about something more structural about what would make people invest and take care of their individual owned buildings. And if there is no provision to mandate maintenance of common areas, for example, infrastructure, building envelope, safety, more commercial areas, slowly it becomes something that is not desirable anymore. And people will start to look at how do we get out of this situation, right? And what's worse, because a lot of these projects are in the city center, which has now, by now, after 30, 40 years, become extremely prime areas. Golden Mile Complex, when it was first developed, was at the outer rim. It was a city periphery. It was a mega structure that arose out of a big coastal, I would say, a village or a squatter settlement, right? And by now it is deemed as a prime area, and the property and land prices are so high that they create the opportunity for residents to start to think of collective sale, right? So one thing they can now agree on is we can all make a lot of money out of this dilapidated and unwanted structures by selling, all collectively agreeing to sell to the highest asking developer. Okay, let's put the price tag up there. It now costs maybe $800 million, and we put it up and launch a collective sale and see which developer wants to come along and take us on. And of course, the premise is it gets knocked down and something bigger and taller gets built in its place, and the residents can cash out after staying there for 30, 40 years. In their retirement age now, they can then get this cash in their hand and move on with life, right, so to speak. So this is becoming a kind of we have a lot of such very important buildings. Some of them are shown in the video just now, that are under the same threat of this collective sale, right? Which I think maybe is something that is quite unique in Singapore, because the law, the law governing the lands, the collective sale actually allows buildings that are as young as 20 years to or 30 years, if the plot ratio of that plot actually increases, it actually inspire the residents to think of, hey, how do I get more out of this little piece of property that are owned by banding together, right? So we do have this issue here, where these once progressive structures of a certain era are now, ironically, maybe a victim of their initial success, right? Under very different social economic situation, because now Singapore is much more affluent and considered developed country compared to the times in the 70s when, you know, we were, you know, on the cusp of reaching, you know, still considered a developing country. Yeah. So these are some structurally, I think, quite different situations that now we are land in this kind of difficult situation. And of course, like I mentioned before, unlike Nikhil, we feel that we probably can't import any overseas model directly and make it work in Singapore. But the happy story is in the last 2 years, thanks to the hard work of course, a lot of, I would say a lot of a number of civil society groups and sympathetic government and planning officers, we are starting to see a mindset change in how these buildings are perceived. And that led to the announcement in late 2020. In fact, it was the best news of the year of the pandemic in Singapore, that the government is now willing to consider conserving Golden Mile complex, right? It's not going to buy it over, definitely not like in the case of the House of Statistics project, but you know, it just goes to show that advocacy, persuasion, and outreach does have its you know, a slow but hopefully steady, persuasive impact on how things can change. You know, yeah. So that's my that's my sharing for now.
Just one question, if I. Oh, okay, no, Nikhil.
No. It's because we have 9 minutes left, and I want to go to Jakarta now because we have heard. Yes, thank you. But if you have time, please, I will come back to you. So I want to know what's you 2016. What's the condition of other modernist structures in Jakarta, and what's happening to them? Is it similar to what's happening in Singapore or nearby countries, or so what's the mindset? You know, so could you please tell any of you?
Hello. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, very wonderful presentation, and I want to ask a few questions to speakers, but I will answer your question first. In Jakarta, we have a view, quite a lot, old building, and there's still a movement to conserve it. But I think there's a few levels of conservation in terms of design. So there's a first very early stage that we have to just save it, not to improve it. But there is two ways of adaptation. You know, that's in archaeologists' mindset, they have to preserve like a dead monument. But we're now facing that situation that what some of the architects thinks that architectural, in terms of architecture, the heritage building should be revitalized, should be a more vital, can be useful, can be used as a living monuments. So at the in the story of stadium, and for instance, very hard to convince last time, until a lot of pressure that if we want to make the building more public, for instance, by adding the new structure, it's difficult because this is we have to preserve this. If you want to make a new more public stadium whatsoever, just build a new one. So this kind of mindset is have a different way of approach in here. So, but sadly, not quite a lot of also the beautiful building have been teared down because of, I think, the same reason with the Singapore. The land is so expensive, and it's better to using better to replace with more density building with the more profit and new functions, and and this kind of this kind of approach still a lot of happening here, and I think that's what we really have to really consider, seeing and what we should do in to conserve. Not to all the heritage building is with a good significance of architecture whatsoever. In here, as long as the old is more than 50 years, it can be conserved. It should be, it can be heritage. But I think we should do it more properly. Which one is significant? Which one is just old building? So we can move on from that side. But yeah, again, I think the government and a lot of architects and all stakeholders start to changing the regulations to more relevant to the situation and everything. I guess that's it. Yeah, I have questions to Konrad and Manfred. This is a beautiful initiative, but I think in terms of situation, yeah, we have a very two different situation, like Weng said. In here, there's a population is still growing very, very high. So that's one of the reasons that they grow and they change the building and to more density and whatsoever. So do you deal, because maybe there, when you said the population is a little bit stagnant and not much, so you have a lot of other spaces to use. So I think if there anything that I think the initiative is beautiful. How you managing between the lot of people with, I think a lot of parties collaborate in in the group, but how how you set the goal. For instance, if you're facing the situation like in Indonesia, maybe in Jakarta, that's very dense and the population is grow. The second question is for Antoine. So I think the gallery is very beautiful. Have a good the initiative to have a grant for conservation. How to get the grant or how to apply to the foundation.
Right. I think we'll go one by one. So the first question for the Konrad, Manfred, who wants to go first?
Yes. In the meantime, Berlin is again a growing city, but in a modest way. We need about 20,000 new apartments every year, and most of them as affordable housing. And we have so much space that in an abstract way would offering opportunities to create new homes. But I mentioned this area around Karl Marx Allee. It's a very low density from the 1960s. And 20 years ago, we had plans to bring a lot of new buildings there, a lot of new people. And every Berliner is defending the green spot and the parking lot in front of its home. And instead of densify this area, we bring it on the World Heritage List instead, because that's easier for us. And we always have negotiation processes. And Haus der Statistik is a success also from the point of view of real estate development, because there is an extremely huge parking lot. We can bring additional people living there, working there, doing something. Without that, there couldn't have been a compromise between the Senator of Finance, who is looking for the money, and us, we want to create affordable housing, and we want to encourage vital urban functions and mixtures.
Konrad, do you want to add to this?
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest problems in my point of view in Berlin is that we have enough space. We have a lot of vacant properties, but we have also a very oversized legal framework to build up new homes, new affordable homes or homes on these properties. So that's not easy. This is very complex. You need a very high expertise of lawyers and planners and so on. And that's why it's very, you need a lot of time to find out the right way and to densify the city. And then also we have this building law that in most of the areas in Berlin, it's not allowed to build up more than 22 meters. So when you would like to densify the city of Berlin, you have to change into, you have to change a lot of laws, or you have to change the legal framework. So you have to also you have to implement a high-rise building structures and a concept for that. And it's always about the discussion with the civil society and the participation processes who are already implemented in the legal framework. So that's not easy. It's not possible to say, okay, let's take this property and we build up some high-rise buildings in the next 2 years. That's not possible. That's not the reality of planning in Germany. But addressing to your wonderful project with the stadium, I think it's very interesting that you try to open up the structure for common uses. So you try to give open space for the people who live in this area to have, I would say, a permanent use of this structure. And this is for me a good strategy to deal with mega structures like that. And this is the same thing we do in here at Haus der Statistik. We open up the ground floor areas, bring in pioneer users here. They testing uses, learning from these processes, and bring it to the official planning level and implement the successful uses in the future of the whole project. So these are the steps we are doing here, and I think maybe it's possible also in your country. I don't know.
Thank you, Moritz. You're raising your hand. Do you want to add to this, or shall I go to Antoine first and then come back to you? You are muted, Moritz. You're muted.
Sorry. I want to do both. I want to comment on what Gregorios said and also follow up on his question to Antoine. For me, we had the pleasure to get a tour to the Gelora Bung Karno complex in 2019 with Maria and Gregorios. And after a couple of days in Jakarta, it was such a pleasure and unexpected situation to come to this public space, which is huge. So, and to see all the people and their activities there. And I think this is, besides the wonderful renovation and upgrading or updating it, I think this is, for me, my personal opinion is that this is the most important part of the project, to open up this. And just as a comment again, and this follows me in every discussion we have on projects like this. This is, for me, this is the most important part. And I'd like to follow up to Gregorios' question to Antoine, who asked for how to apply for the grant. I'd like to add that that there's or was not even one project from Southeast Asia that was granted. over the whole 7 or 8 years process. Do you have, Antoine, do you have any idea why?
So it's a very, very good question, and it's something that has puzzled us for a while, because it's not for lack of trying. One of the things that I was acutely aware of when we launched the initiative is to reach out to as many agencies as we could possibly do. So I send out notices to ICOMOS, through DOCOMOMO, through the national committees, but I even went as far to target certain cities and look at heritage departments or schools of architecture, where I try to find email addresses and contact people directly. And I did so. I was actually so hopeful to perhaps be able to support a conservation plan for a building by Van Molevan. I've reached out to people in the Philippines, in even I think I looked at projects in Jakarta. So there were, I did reach out a lot, and I think we were able to support a project in Taiwan and in Japan, and then a few projects in India, and that's basically as far as we were able to get. And I should also say that, we are a very large international funder, but we actually have a small budget. We have annually around $9 or $10 million. And we fund in the areas of support for museums, curatorship, exhibitions, research. We support academic art history, and then conservation. So while we don't allot a specific amount to each of these categories, when we average it out over 3 to 4 years, we do spend about $3 to $4 million, perhaps a bit closer to $3 million on conservation projects annually. So like what I said earlier, on Keeping It Modern, we spend about $12.5 million over 8 years. But regrettably, the initiative, the open competition stopped in 2020. 2020 was our final year. And that's, where we supported Patel Stadium. So they're just starting their project. We also supported, incidentally, a project in Berlin, which is the Oberstufen Schulzentrum in Wedding, which is a fabulous 1970s school building that was built with the idea of really engaging the community and having the school there. And now they have to find a new use for that building. So Gregorius, I was really interested to hear your explanation of the project, and congratulations on all the work that you've done. I mean, it's really fantastic. But I regret that, we have no longer any grants in the Keeping It Modern competition. Well, maybe lastly, I should add is that we will still support some regional workshops, because one of the things that we noticed is that the grantees themselves were very eager to also organize their workshops and share, their approach to preserving their building. And we recognize that it is important. So we will still support a few workshops. One, I think, in the next coming years in Taiwan, likely, because of the Henry Luce project. But that's open for people from the region. So when Henning or Nikhil or Gregorius, if you're interested in that, you would be able to express your interest in participating.
Right. Thank you very much, Anton, for explaining that. And we will surely. I mean, it's sad that it has been stopped, because now there is more awareness in Southeast Asia, and maybe if you restart it, you will get few projects from here, and hopefully they will win. Yeah. But thank you very much for telling us about the Taiwan one the next year. I can also tell that next year, I mean, actually we got the funding from ASEAN Cultural Fund, NUS, and through our Ministry of Culture here in Singapore, and to NUS, our department got money from ASEAN Cultural Fund to host an ASEAN level a workshop, a 3 weeks workshop on modern heritage for the 10 ASEAN countries, and this is for the architecture students. So we couldn't do it last year. We couldn't do it this year. We didn't want to do it online because we were not very comfortable with it unless you go and experience the buildings and things like that. So we are hoping, fingers crossed, that next year the situation will improve, and in July we can invite 20 students from 10 ASEAN countries, and we can have we call it a field school on modern heritage conservation here in US. That will be fantastic. But if we can have somebody coming from Getty or to share their knowledge, maybe online or face to face. If you are in Taiwan at that point, it's not very far. Then it will be wonderful. So we can coordinate that. And I just wanted to add, Gregorius, you mentioned about that you have a lot of buildings of 20th century in Jakarta, but you have no idea or people have a little idea about how to assess them, about their the significance, the values. Getty Institute, Conservation Institute, published in 2021 a publication which I'll send the link later. It's called the 20th Century Historic Thematic Framework, a tool for assessing heritage places, and this is specifically for 20th century buildings. So I think it's a wonderful document. You should go and it's free to download, as many Getty publications. Wonderful. Thank you very much for that. And it's a wonderful document. If you want to share it with your colleagues and use it, because we are planning to use it for our workshops and for teaching and training here in US as well. So I will send you the link, and it's free to download. It's quite a thick document, but nicely written with a lot of graphics. So it will be very wonderful for you to use it to assess the level of buildings, and then it will be more kind of a better framework you will have, that which buildings to be preserved, which cannot be preserved, or which can be adapted to be used, and things like that. Right, Moritz, you were raising your hand. You have to add to something. Yeah.
Yes. In some way, I want to come back a little bit to my question to Antoine, and my observations also from the project, from our encounters with Southeast Asian Modernism project, and also what I hear in this discussion. So now we are talking about Singapore, which is, let's say, the most developed part of Southeast Asia. So then we are talking about Jakarta, which is kind of second. I don't know how to differentiate this. But what about the other countries like Cambodia, Laos? Besides the situation in Myanmar, which is actually very, very sad at the moment, but it might change, hopefully. And where nothing is kind of carried by institutions. So. And there's not like in Singapore or in Berlin this kind of civil society which cares about the built heritage, and this is kind of question or just a remark to the structure of the Getty Institute. So it's very, very sad that the stadium by Van Mollivan was not included, but I fully can understand from the situation. I spent a lot of time in Cambodia and in Phnom Penh, and that there's nobody on the official side. There is, in fact, no heritage management as we know it in the Western countries. So, and the people have much different problems than we. And the politics, the government is not really democratic. It's kind of guided democracy, to use this term. And so I think, but these countries have a rich, very rich modernist heritage. The same as in Vietnam.
Absolutely.
I think we have to find other ways to bring the money and the knowledge into and to establish structures to conserve these buildings. And like the speaker in Weng Hin's video or in the Docomomo Singapore video said, it's like burning books, like burning history. So, and in countries like Cambodia, daily the history is burned. I had the pleasure to write an architectural guide to Phnom Penh. And while writing the book, several of the buildings were demolished. So by the period 1 year later, yes. we could have blackened some pages. I think this is quite important to consider countries like this, especially in Southeast Asia, and find ways to raise awareness and to give the power to activists, to people there, to raise their voice.
I think you're absolutely right, but especially, you know, I tried pretty hard in Vietnam and in Cambodia. It's very political. Really political, and I've written to universities. You know, the building of the Institute of Languages at the university is a beautiful Van Mollivan building. I tried with the stadium, even writing people at the Heritage Board. You know, government officials, never even received a reply, and you know. You have to understand, I mean, that as a funder and, you know, as a nonprofit organization, we are sometimes in a difficult situation because, you know, we'd like to reach out to people. We genuinely want to work with a proposal, but not everybody understands that. You know, people on the other end may think, you know, why do they do this? What do they want from us? So there's sometimes suspicion, sometimes there's plainly no interest, and sometimes we run into the problem that we get proposed a privately owned project, and because we are a non-profit organization, our funding really is for the general public, for the projects that are in the public realm. So we cannot support anything that is privately owned.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So that was a real restriction that we ran into a couple of times.
Moritz, I just wanted to add, because we have 2.5 minutes left, and this is the final 2.5 minutes. For us, as an academic institution and one of the premier institution situated in Asia. For us, it was very, very important that, you know, we can't straight away, when we talk about heritage conservation, it's not just about buildings. You know, in all the 4 presentations, we said it's a mindset. And to change the mindset, we have to educate people. And who best to educate is our younger architects, the younger generation. And so that's a particular reason that we started our master's program in architecture conservation, the first one in the entire country, this January. So I think a lot of neighboring countries are quite keen to join hands and collaborate, be UNESCO Bangkok, which has the cultural unit there. They are very closely working, or we are very closely working with them. In fact, there was we in 2.5 years we managed to not just NUS but other parties as well. We managed to publish a competency framework for education, for conservation education, because I think Getty cannot do everything all over the world, right? So I know Jeff Cody is quite heavily he used to come here in Penang and hosting all these workshops and everything, and in fact he gave lecture in my module as well. So I think Getty is doing wonderful. For me, putting all those publications online for free of charge is wonderful. Thank you very much. We use it all the time, and so education awareness is the first step for us. And if we can educate the younger generation, hopefully they will become the minister or the Senate member for the Singapore or neighboring countries, Vietnam, Cambodia, and then they will think differently. They will see this as an important part. And I think I want to end here because it's exactly our time out. So that's my last word, because and if you know, this is a wonderful event for networking as well, and I'm seeing chat, and in the chat people are already contacting each other, which is wonderful. But thank you again very much, everyone, for joining us tonight. It's 11 p.m. in Singapore, so I'm sure it's early morning or late evening in Berlin. So
and 8 a.m. in LA, I would say.
All right.
That's right.
Right. So you can go back to sleep, and we can go back to sleep as well. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining today, and especially to all the speakers who presented such wonderful presentations and thought-provoking presentations. And we had, I think, very wonderful discussion as well. So thank you, everyone, once again, and good night from Singapore.